Neil, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me on this afternoon. I guess morning for you still with the time difference, but I'm glad you're here. I'm excited to hear your story. And we obviously want to talk about the spiritual journey. And I'm sure we'll get into yours and how we tend to have this view of what that needs to look like often. And that's become, in my view, a bit mainstream. People tend to, there's a lot of people now that talk about spiritual awakening and consciousness and all of these things. And my view on it sometimes when I'm reflecting is we don't necessarily need to label it, but rather just experience it. And I'm sure we'll touch on that as well. But before we get into our conversation, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, what's brought you here.
Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
get
And it's a pleasure to be here today. So thank you for this. I'll keep this brief. And I did write a book about my journey and my process, hoping that book I wrote and the detail at which I share things can help somebody else who might be pondering or struggling to find something that makes sense to them. And what I offer to people is based in science, rational, logical, step by step. I'm an engineer, step by step. So it's laid out in a way that I hope makes sense to people and could offer them a path. Because as you mentioned, there's multiple paths to the top of the mountain. It's
Mhm.
not that one is better than the other. It's just what resonates with you as that individual.
Yeah.
So, who am I? Professional engineer, born in 1960, youngest of six. Father died when I was 5. Back in the 60s, walked to school on my own. We're at a school wasn't very far from our place either, but still walked and looked after ourselves, those kinds of things. When I was 13, since my dad died when I was 13, my mom remarried a rancher in northern BC, and I was the youngest of the six. So I moved to northern BC, lived on a ranch, ran 500 head of cattle, 130 head of horses, 40, 50 below in the winter, lots of times 20, 30 below. I learned to ride a horse, rustle cattle, all those kinds of things. Came back doing high school by correspondence. Came back, finished half of grade 11, grade 12 in the town that I grew up in, which is south of Vancouver, British Columbia. And then struggled with what I was going to do. When I turned
Mhm.
20, I decided I'd go into engineering. My uncle was an engineer, and I thought, oh, I'll take engineering. So got an engineering degree, worked in the corporate world, got MBA in my mid 30s, all the traditional stuff. 2 marriages, second marriage, combined marriage. We're still together. 3 kids in that combined marriage. Anyway, bottom line is went into consulting, my own consulting business in the year 2000. And from 2000 to 2015 or 2002 to 2015, unbeknownst to me, I slowly drove myself into this really deep, dark, despondent depression. And no
Mhm.
one knew I was there. I knew I was there, but no one else did. My wife didn't know. My family didn't know. And I picked up some newly issued spiritual books at the time, all the typical stuff, Wayne
Mhm.
Dyer, Carolyn Mice, all those kinds of things. And they all made sense to me, but I didn't really understand it.
Mhm.
Anyway, I tried to get myself out of this, what I labeled a funk at the time.
Mhm.
And we had our house, we had built a really beautiful waterfront house, a very expensive waterfront house, remote from Vancouver. And my wife said at the time, this will be our best financial decision or our worst financial decision. Market crashed in 2008, never recovered. And so we had the house on the market for 5 years. And finally, it sold in November of 2017 with an ink deal. And we were going to move end of January, early February the following year. At that point, I was done with it. My life, from my perspective, I was miserable. No matter what I did, no matter how much money I made, nothing seemed to work out. I did very well as a consultant. Clients loved me and I could manage small projects, large projects. It didn't matter. But the thing was, I got satisfaction in that work, But other than that, I was just totally miserable with life and miserable at my job as well. Like the people I worked with were great, but all the higher ups, I was just like, I wanted to be done with this command and
Mhm.
control structure, right?
Mhm.
And so, house sold. My wife got on a plane to go to Toronto, Ontario, Canada to visit family and friends. I sat down at this little 1 bedroom rental apartment kitchen table, crafted out my suicide note, planned my suicide. And I figured I would do that deed after we moved, and I got rid of a bunch of stuff, helped my wife move, and then I would do it in a way that in life insurance would make her financially sound. A week prior to that, some material showed up for me that promised to liberate me from my thinking if I studied it and I followed it. And I thought, okay, one last go. I'll give it a go. If it doesn't work, I can keep pushing it out. If it's working, if it's not working, I can always call it quits.
Mhm.
So I started that process and I did it diligently and I followed it and I read it and I reread it and I just kept cycling through this material. Over the course of the year, I went from this really deep, dark, despondent depression to just slowly emerging from that to where at the end of December 2018, so 13 months later, part of this process is learn how to meditate. I went into this meditation and I had two of them 2 days apart. Went into this meditation and very quickly got into this really deep silence and stillness of the mind and this spiritual energy flowing into me. And all of a sudden, just in a nanosecond, I was filled and totally enveloped like a deep sea diver in the ocean, just suspended in the ocean of unconditional love. And I
Mhm.
felt totally loved and totally supported, not judged. And I didn't care what anybody had done to me in the past, and I didn't care what I had done to anybody. I just wanted to stay there forever. I didn't care what aches and pains my body had, what illnesses it had. And I came out of that meditation. 2 days later, I had the exact same meditation. And at that point, I knew that this process I followed brought me back to our truth, to who we really are.
Mhm.
And so then I didn't tell anybody about it. No, didn't share it with my wife. And I kept on with that process because I wanted to be so grounded in that process that any opposing opinion by the logic and rationale of other people could not shake me out of that. And spent a couple of years doing that. And then I decided when I was so grounded that it didn't matter what anybody said to me, it's not going to change my opinion or my beliefs. I
Mhm.
decided I would like to write a book and share my story
Mhm.
and the process and a very detailed, or well, a lot of detail about personal information in the memoir part of the book, which is the first couple parts of the book, to describe to people the types of feelings and thoughts that I developed embedded in myself that dictated how and created events that continued to be brought to me through my lifetime that subjected me to all of the things that I did not like and did not enjoy. And conversely brought me things that I did and did enjoy. And then the rest of the book, there's 5 parts in the book. Part 3, if I remember correctly at this point. Part 3 is designed to open the reader to these new concepts of consciousness and give some foundational knowledge to springboard into part 4, which is a sharing of this material that I received and with
Mhm.
some excerpts. And then part for the 5 of the book is really what I experienced as I went through this process through this year, through that one
Mhm.
year and how it took me out of this really deep, dark, despondent depression to a state of inner peace and love and joy and non judgment of anybody or anything that's around me. And then
Yeah.
from then on, it's just been this upward journey. And we can
Mhm.
talk about that because that in itself is a bit of a thing. And it's just, I can tell you, no matter where you are in life, happy, unhappy, ill, healthy, wealthy, or poor, you can totally change your life no matter where you are, whether you live in a mansion or you live on the street. You just need the right tools, the right understanding, and to be diligent in the process. And as long as that process outlines everything for you, you can totally take yourself to an entirely new place right where you are, even though nothing changes in your environment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing all that. And I, again, also appreciate your vulnerability. It's very fascinating as you were sharing your personal story because there's so many similarities between you and I. I'm also an engineer, worked in corporate, got my MBA, mid 30s, went through a divorce at that time. And I experienced what I would explain as depression during the pandemic. And I'm fortunate that I was able to find something to connect to. And very similar to your meditative practice as you were describing it, for me, it was being on a hike one day and just I was out there seeking answers because there was a lot of change coming up in my life. And very similar to yourself, I was sitting out on this mountaintop just looking at this natural beauty just in front of me. And I felt held and supported and connected. And I knew that no matter what life is going to throw at me, I'll be fine. And I guess what I want to understand from your perspective, a couple of things actually. The first one being there are moments of chaos throughout our existence and they continue to come up. And for me, it's I look at them as opportunities to, again, connect with something beyond myself and navigate these chaotic situations, knowing that this is just part of our existence. But in the bigger picture view, none of it really matters. What really matters is how we're able to find this connection and lean on it from time to time. How have you been? So you explained late 2018 is where you really found this deeper sense within yourself. But over the last 5, 6 years, how have you able to manage the day to day stressors or just life in general? How do you navigate that?
So I think when people are, okay, so to be specific for me, but we'll do it in a general way as well, is that all of the thoughts and beliefs you have that dictate your life, that you're going to go through this process of inner cleansing of your consciousness and then rebuilding it to be consistent from where we come from before we're born and where we return to after we die. When you can come back to complete alignment with where where you come from or where you return to after you die, it's the same spot, so to
Yeah.
speak, same state of consciousness. When you come into complete alignment with that and embody that moment by moment in your day, you will have attained your goal, your journey here. And that can take many lifetimes to make that happen. So, where we're going through this process and we're still experiencing and we're still having these egoic reactions and judgments and negative comments or negative concepts about what's going on outside of us, it's still part of our journey of learning to understand and let go of those things and be connected at all times with our creator, whether you want to call it source, God, Yahweh, the Tao, it doesn't matter. There's only one creator, and it doesn't matter what you call it, but there's only one creator, and it is unconditional love. When you can fully embody that unconditional love, you're going through this process of raising your vibrational frequency of consciousness to enter into these states of unconditional love. But while we're on that journey, and I still experience things that I react to, that I might get somewhat stressed about. And so, what I'm working on doing now is that when things come into my life, and I've been doing this for a couple, 3 years now, when things come into my life that I react to and I stress about, I might have that egoic reaction in the moment, and many times I do. But when I leave that situation, then I analyze it for what's in me that's I'm responding to, and I have that concept of that thing outside me that I'm reacting to. So it's got nothing to do with anybody outside of me. It's got everything to do with me. And I'm not saying this from, hey, I'm better than anybody else. This is just the way it works. Is
Mhm.
there's nothing outside of you. You are the only one in the room, and you're having this, I'm going to call it now, and I'm going to use different language. Like my book is very scientific, based in Newtonian science, and it'll
Mhm.
describe things away with what we know in science today. And, but since then, I have come to understand that in reality, we are, there's nowhere that you're going to go when you die. You just leave this frequency, if you will, and you
Mhm.
reside in a higher frequency in the same physical spot, if you will, because there's nothing outside of you. You are just having this dream, and you have all of these characters that you have created in your dream to elicit and give you the experiential opportunity of experience something that is different than unconditional love,
Mhm.
and then learning to understand and learning to embody that without, by enabling source to, by enabling you to raise your frequency back up to
Mhm.
near source frequency, to embody it and understand it, not react to it, and still respond to it in a loving,
Yes.
loving, kind, accepting way. And
Mhm.
so I'm still going through this process where I will react to something. Then I
Mhm.
go away and I think about it and I embody it and I ask for guidance, and I will get
Mhm.
guidance about it. And it's just something that I still need to release emotionally and accept about myself, and then
Mhm.
release it and experience it, because we're here to experience these things that are contrary to unconditional love. Experience it and love that experience. Learn to love it and feel it. And the more you do that, the more that negative or fearful reaction that you have will dissipate and go away, and you'll no longer react to
Mhm.
that situation, that person, that event, that thing that you reacted to.
Yeah, no, I can definitely appreciate that. And what I'm hearing from you is there's an aspect of acceptance and even compassion for yourself as you're figuring this out. Because the way I see it is, like I said earlier, too, there are opportunities. It's almost like going to school, right? You're trying to learn a lesson, and sometimes you may that lesson may need to be repeated over and over again until you fully internalize it and learn from it until you're ready to graduate and move on to the next one. But that is part of this entire experience. But I am curious also, because this is something I struggled with, but eventually was able to get past. As an engineer, you try to make sense of everything and you're trying to solve problems. And I think there were times, even when I was doing engineering, you just had to iterate on a certain solution, not knowing if it was fully functional or not. And I always struggled with that concept. But then when you come into this realm of our experience, there's really no way to define it or put it into words. Sometimes it's just an experience you have. And it at times it could feel lonely because you don't know how to explain it. But then there's a beauty behind it too, because you can accept it for what it is and recognize that this is a unique experience I'm having and I'm super grateful to go through this. How were you able to navigate all that?
When I was going through that process of learning the real purpose of meditation and how to meditate effectively to make this connection with source, and allow source to enter into me and make itself known to me. So that's how I'll describe that. So essentially, today, with just a moment of silence I can have that inflow of beauty, silence, peace, love flow through me. And when I am confronted with something which I'm egoically reacting to, I ask for assistance and help with that.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, I get filled with this energy that is so powerful and at the same time soft and loving and caressing and holding. Like we just don't have the words to describe this. You experience it. Like spirituality, it's not all the mental gymnastics and figuring everything out. It is understanding enough so that you understand what you're really trying to do is get enough logic in your brain that makes sense to you from a rational perspective, how whatever that means to you, so that you are reaching out, making this connection and then getting guidance.
Hmm.
And then learning to trust and rely on that guidance instead of your human concepts and rationality that we always try to figure things out or figure out why this person is behaving this way. And if you come to this point where you understand that there's nothing outside of you, these are all just characters in your play, if you will, that are trying to elicit things in you so that you have this experiential event. And
Hmm.
from our perspective, human perspective, it's learn to embody that and love it and accept it. So I get this spiritual energy to come in and I'm learning to, and I'm going to say this, I'm learning to totally rely on it in every moment of the day. Rely on it, trust it, and no matter what's going on in front of me. So the more extreme an event is in front of me or I should say, the more extreme my reaction is to an event, I am learning how to take those things that I might fear or react to in a really extreme way and at the same time embody this energy so that it can help me move through this
Hmm.
and dissipate it and learn to love it and know that I am totally cared for, loved, protected, and maintained in peace and security.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I'm just curious to get your views on this too. Do you feel like a lot of people that are atheists, is that where they get stuck because that blocker comes up because you're not able to logically explain some of these experiences or even make sense of it, whether it's trying to rationalize it? I'm just again curious to hear your thoughts or views on that piece.
So I think so for me, I wasn't an atheist, but I was no, so I'll come back to your question specifically, but I wasn't an atheist, but what I was, I didn't have any religious training. I didn't
Mhm,
believe, I wasn't indoctrinated in any spiritual or religious trainings. So when I remember as a kid, like 7, 8 years old in the playground on the grass, looking at the stars or not the stars, the clouds in the sky and feeling the sunshine and looking at all the bugs and every blade of grass and clover and other little weeds that are growing and thinking, and trees that were these magnificent oak trees and things, and thinking about how magnificent this is. There's got to be something beyond us that has created this, but not knowing
mhm,
what that was, not having any religious training. I was in this state of not being indoctrinated by any set rules or concepts, but being totally open.
mhm.
And by being totally open, then I was willing to read stuff and then make a decision with all that rational thinking that we come up with as we get older and decide whether that made sense to me or not. And I think so, whether it's someone that is fully indoctrinated in a religion and this is the way it is, and believe everything that's written in black and white in front of you and following those practices, that is just as tough as I think, being an atheist. I'm just making some guesses here, but that would be just as tough as being an atheist because you're
Right.
so indoctrinated in your own thinking and in your own concepts that you can't get beyond for fear,
Mm-hmm.
of to your autonomy, of fear to your individuality, of fear to something that is beyond you that you don't have control of, to be open to it, to learn. Eventually, you will get there, whether it's this lifetime or another lifetime. Something will happen to you that will take you to a point of where you are open. And for
Mm-hmm.
those people that are just in that thing of, maybe they had some religious training, but they don't really believe in it at all, or maybe they're atheist, but they're willing to be open. That gives them the opportunity to explore all these various things that are out there by all these various teachers. And hopefully, something at some point will land and make sense to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then, my only words of advice, if you will, at this point is that when you read it and you understand it, your goal should be to get to this point where you make this connection with source through learning how to meditate properly. The purpose of meditation is to make connection with source.
Mm-hmm.
Source emits unconditional love unstintingly every nanosecond of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel it because of your thinking and your feeling that you have indoctrinated yourself and grown up with and trained yourself from babyhood to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can be open, you make this connection. When you make that connection, then the process is learning to go within. Every question that you have, every answer that is available to every question you have is all within inside you. People get, there's a lot of people that are in this process of still looking without. They might make this connection. They might be able to, they're awake and aware, I would say. So they've woken up. They understand we're in this matrix, if you will, as some people describe it. They understand there are spiritual things outside of them. Maybe they have the gift of clairvoyance or clairaudience or clairsentience. They might have all of those gifts. So they might be able to see spiritual things. They might be able to hear guidance within, but they still look at teachers outside of them, someone channeling someone, a particular individual channeling a council or channeling God or channeling Jesus or Mary Magdalene or things like that. So they're still exploring and looking outside of them for answers to questions that they have. And that's all okay. But that's a place where people get and they can feel that they've become enlightened and they are stuck at that level. And what you really need to do is get beyond that level and go and understand that you have created everything that is in your world, and your guidance and your connection with source or the Christ or whoever you want to connect with, your connection is actually you coming to rescue you and wake you up and give you advice in terms of how to accelerate your consciousness to come into full 100% use of your mind, and then beyond it merging with the oneness of God, oneness of source.
Yeah, it's
That's a process on its own.
right. Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is having that level of openness and not being too rigid, which kind of leads us into the whole idea of even if you do awaken and you're on this path, it's easy to get attached to certain outcomes and also get attached to a path. And sometimes you can fall into that trap of comparing yourself to other people or trying to emulate other people's journey. But as you and I were talking prior to jumping on this episode, that the path in itself is very unique. And that's also part of the beauty of it, right? We're all going through different experiences at different times, and there's really no fixed time to get there, nor is there one specific path to get there. So again, just wanted to get your views on that as well.
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely correct. We might have commonalities with experiences and feelings about particular experiences, but every path is unique. So if you understand that there's one creator and everything's created out of that one creator. That actually means that we're all equal. And we can use this language. I would not use this language too much anymore, but I'll use this language. Your soul, because that this now concepts up certain things
Mhm.
about being external from you, which is not necessarily accurate. But your soul is equal to every soul that
Mhm.
that comes in your vicinity.
Mhm.
It's unconditional
Mhm.
love, peace, joy, abundance, prosperity. It is unconditional love. The only difference between individuals is the mental thongs and chains that, their environment that shaped them, their parents' language that they used, the where they grew up. They came in with certain things they want to learn, but then they're shaped by their environment in their early years. They grow up, they reinforce those learnings as they go out and they learn more experiences and things, and they bind themselves down with these mental thongs and chains that keep their soul shut off from the light, if you will. And what we're here to do is dissolve these bondages and chains, whatever is the right timing for that individual. And everybody's timing will be different and everybody's experience will be different. Because if you think of it this way, if God is unconditional love, is light and unconditional love, then the only way to experience what we would call dark and things that are not unconditional love, hate, vengeance, all those other things, cruelties, the only way to experience that is to have a creation that shuts themselves off and believes they are not God.
Mhm.
And if you believe you are apart and separate from God, and the ego is the mechanism to do that, to shut itself off, then
Mhm.
you think you are left to your own devices. You're
Mhm.
shaped by your environment, and then you experience and you express yourself, and it's a unique thing. So, by
Mhm.
having everybody have a different experience on their path, and everybody having a different experience of this experiential thing that we're here doing, expedition, then it creates a richness in the expansion of Christ consciousness. And so everybody will have a unique path, even though we're all one.
Sorry, we'll continue. I don't know what happened there. Technology, but yeah,
Yeah.
so what I was saying was if you have that understanding that you are separate and that is the belief you internalize, I'm also a firm believer that our thoughts then create our reality, right? So if you are separate from, like you said, love, peace, and joy, then you're going to experience the opposite, right? You're going to experience the apathy, the anger, the envy. And then that's what you're manifesting around you. And then people get stuck in that. Oh, these are all these circumstances that are happening to me and I can't get out of this rut. But what are you doing for yourself? What are you thinking? What are your thought patterns? So I think obviously to your point, not only and I've talked to various people about this, but not only has the creator created us, but we're also creating, right? We have that free will to create. And I think a lot of the times we lose sight of that as individuals.
And I agree with you 100% that it's your thinking and your feeling that creates these events and experiences. So if we take it to Newtonian science,
Yeah.
your you think with electrical impulses in the brain and you feel with magnetic impulses in the nervous system. Your thoughts, and I'm not talking about the words that come out of your mouth. And so I'll just take a little segue. I'll come back to this. You can have an experience of something, another person, an event, whatever, and you're with some friends, or maybe you're in a work environment or something, And you're nice and you're kind and you use these nice, kind words and, oh, isn't that a great event and stuff. But inside you might be thinking, oh, I hate this thing. Oh, that
Mhm.
person is such an a-hole. And I wish I didn't have to work for him or her, or that kind of thing. It's your thoughts that you repeat. And you repeat them at this high frequency, and by frequency, repetitive
Mhm.
thinking. These are the things. This is your electrical consciousness plan. It's like a blueprint. And then your feelings associated with that magnetize those like event, or magnetize energy particles to come together to create another event or another experience that will come to you, that will rebound back to you in your life. So
Mhm.
it's your repetitive thoughts. So an example of this on the flip side is that in 2011, I decided, like a real BMW fan, but I decided, oh, this hardtop Lexus convertible that had come out at the time. I thought, oh, that'd be a nice car to try and have. And maybe one day it's a $60,000 car back then. And I thought, oh, maybe one day I'll save up and I'll buy that car. And what I did was, unbeknownst to me, this is 2011. So unbeknownst to me, I had a picture of the car in my office, and I sat down every day. And every day I sat down for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. And multiple times in the day, I would just think about me sitting in that car, top down, wind in my hair, driving on a windy road, and just felt the joy and the peace with all of that. And just thought, oh yeah, one day I'll get that. And maybe I'll put a plan in place even to get that. Kept that up for an entire year. Every year since I was 20, since I was a little kid, my mom used to buy these tickets to what we call the Pacific National Exhibition in
Mhm.
Vancouver. Every year in late August, early September, they had this exhibition. They always gave away a house and 12 cars. And I always bought tickets. When I turned 20, I started buying tickets myself. And I always had the dream of getting the house, fully furnished house, built brand new. And I never paid attention to the cars because I always had a car that I liked. And so anyway, so every year routinely I'd buy this stuff, and then it came online. So it's really easy to buy in the spring. Buy tickets, forget about it, and just wait for that call in early September that I won the house. And so in 2010, I bought tickets, or no, 2011, I started to go through this process in September. In the spring,
Mhm.
I bought tickets to the fair, didn't look at the cars, hoping for the house as I all normally did. At in early September, I got a call from the PNE, and I thought, oh, I wonder what they're phoning about. Maybe I got the house. Anyway, I pick up the phone. They queried who I was and got confirmation who I was. I won the exact car that I had pictured for that year.
Mhm.
That is me, an example of me and the slowness of that manifestation. But the example of me doing a repetitive thing every day that brought me joy and love and peace. And it was the exact color, it was the exact model of the car that I had been visualizing. I won that car, $60,000 car. We do that with everything that comes into our life, be it a material object or be it an event or an experience that comes into our life.
Right.
One of the first things I had to learn going through this process, and this I describe in the book, in the book that I wrote, which is called A Higher Road, by the way, that the first thing I had to do is sort through and understand that everything I thought as right or wrong, good or bad, true or false, is really just a belief. And therefore, if I was experiencing things that I didn't like, really what I needed to do was understand what that underlying belief was and know that I could change it if I had the right process.
Mhm.
So I read a book, I share this whole process in my book, but I share this process I went through. So the first thing I had to learn was that I didn't know how to change those beliefs because I believed they were right. Second thing I learned was that what we think about can either draw health or bring illness to our body, to our cells. And the kind of the third thing I needed to learn and understand was that since 1960, they used to think that the brain atrophied as you got older.
Mhm.
And what they just determined in 1960 and then have since then expanded that research is that you can actually grow new brain cells and you can develop new neural pathways. So I share
Hmm.
all of this. I share the books I read that helped me with this to understand that, okay, so first is everything you believe, right or wrong, good or bad, true or false, just a belief. Your beliefs and your thinking can bring you illness or health. And the third thing is you can change neural pathways and learn and grow new brain cells.
Right.
And then it's okay, what process do I need to actually do that? And that's this material that showed up for me. It took me through the spiritual understandings. It used concepts in Newtonian physics that were understandable because each of us know enough about Newtonian physics these days to grab these concepts. They're logical, they're rational, they're applied to specific examples of things that you experience in your life. But unbeknownst to you, what's really going on is it's starting to cleanse your consciousness and help you rebuild it. And as you go through that process, that may take a year, may take longer, but as you go through that process diligently every day, you will slowly change your concepts of self. You will slowly change your beliefs and you bring them back into alignment with where we come from and where we return to after death.
Hmm.
And then you'll make this connection with source because you will build new brain cells with new knowledge that operate at a higher vibrational frequency that allows source to make itself known to you. And then you'll start to feel these energies come into your body and you won't know what they are because it's the weirdest feeling. But then they'll start to expand and grow, and then you'll understand what's going on. This is what happened to me anyway. As you do that, then you might do what I did was you get really solid in it, and then you might start still looking outside of you for other teachings and stuff to learn. And then I went through this process of reading a teaching here and then doing the mental gymnastics to try and make it line up with what I believed as right. And I
Hmm.
could typically do that. But after a while, I got tired of all the mental gymnastics. Like, why do that? I don't need to do that. And then I started to look outside myself for channelers that were bringing messages and stuff like that. Now I'm connected with source and I look for every direction and every bit of advice, if you will, or direction or guidance that I can get from source about everything I do in my life. And as that happens, I can feel my consciousness energies rising from what they
Hmm.
were.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I thank you for sharing all of that, Neil. And I think it's important to highlight that. And I guess just to make sure here, your goal isn't to prescribe a specific process, but it's rather to guide people as they navigate their own individual journeys. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. So again, my book, A Higher Road, offers the process I went through and the logic that I went through that may help all kinds of people.
Hmm.
It's not the only path. There are many paths. You've got like every individual as well as I do. You put 100 people in the room, you
Hmm.
deliver a message one way, it might reach 5 or 10%. You deliver the exact same information in a different way, it hits another few percent, and then in a third way. And so
Yeah.
depending on the receptivity of the individual hearing the information, it may take many different multiple paths to actually get them to understand what you're actually trying to say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so like I said, there's many paths. You just have to find one and then don't get attached to it. As I said, your goal is to actually learn how to meditate, enter the silence and stillness of your mind and make this connection with source. And when you make this connection with source, I can tell you, you will get guidance. And then you've got to learn to rely and trust that guidance. And you might be directed to read something else. You might be directed to talk to somebody. You might be just given specific guidance for you. But I tell you, things will happen surreptitiously in your life. Someone will show up when you need it.
Yes. Yes, I agree. No, Neil, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your personal story, but also educating us around different ways that we can learn to do these things and find that connection, but also be in a position and place where we can manifest things that are going to serve us. So it's important to highlight all of that. I know we covered a lot also, but what are some ways? I know you've talked about your book too, but what are some ways listeners can find your work or you if they wanted to learn more from you? What are some ways they can do that?
So the simplest way to do that is if you go to ahigherroad.com, that'll take you to my author website. And you can learn about the book, you can learn about me, you can do all those things. And there's a web address on there you can connect me with. But essentially, if you do info at dneilelliot.com, which is where A Higher Road will take you, that's an email address you can reach out to me.
All right, great. We'll put all of that in the show notes. But thank you again, Neil, for your time. Much appreciated.
It's been my pleasure. And thank you so much for your time today and for getting this out to your audience.